Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of his flagship, watching the impossible sight before him. Massive alien ships hung in space above Earth like dark clouds blocking out the sun. Each vessel was 10 times larger than anything humans had ever built. Their black metal surfaces seemed to absorb light itself. "How many are there?" Jake asked his aide, Captain Amy Rodriguez. "Over 3,000 ships just above Earth, sir. Similar fleets are appearing above every human colony." Amy's voice was steady, but Jake could see the fear in her eyes. Jake had been an admiral for 15 years. He had fought pirates in the outer systems and defended colonies from raiders. But nothing had prepared him for this moment. The alien fleet was beyond anything he could imagine fighting. The communication system crackled to life. A voice spoke, in perfect English, though it sounded strange and mechanical. "Humans of Earth and all colony worlds. I am High Commander Vexthil of the Zephyrian Empire. Your species has been chosen for incorporation into our great civilization." Jake felt his blood run cold. He had heard stories of the Empire from deep space traders. They were conquerors who had ruled the galaxy for thousands of years. No species had ever successfully resisted them. "You have 72 hours to make your choice," the alien voice continued. "Submit to Imperial rule, dismantle your military forces, and accept tributary status. Your leaders will be replaced by Imperial governors. Your people will serve thee. Empire as all civilized species do." The bridge fell silent. Jake looked around at his crew. These were good people, brave soldiers, who had dedicated their lives to protecting humanity. Now they faced an enemy that made their efforts seem like children playing with toys. "The alternative is simple," Vexthil said. "Complete annihilation. We have destroyed rebellious species before. Their worlds are now empty spaces in our star. Maps. Choose wisely." The transmission ended. Jake stood in the sudden quiet, his mind racing. He had to contact President Lisa Hamilton immediately. This decision was too big for any one person to make. An hour later, Jake sat in an emergency meeting with the leaders of all human colonies. The holographic images of governors, generals, and scientists filled the war room. President Hamilton looked tired. She had been in meetings since the alien fleet arrived. "The situation is clear," Hamilton said. "We cannot fight them. Our entire fleet has maybe 500 ships. They have thousands above Earth alone. Their technology is centuries ahead of ours." General Frank Torres, head of the Colonial Defense Forces, slammed his fist on the table. "We cannot just surrender. Humans don't kneel to anyone." "And what do you suggest?" asked Dr. Paul Chun, the chief scientist. "That we commit suicide? Because that's what fighting them would be." Jake had been quiet during the argument. Now he spoke up. "What exactly does tributary status mean?" Dr. Chun pulled up data on his tablet. "Based on reports from traders who have dealt with the Empire, tributary species lose all independence. Their governments are dissolved. Their people work for the Empire. Resources are shipped to Imperial worlds. It's slavery with better words. But they survive," Hamilton pointed out. "Our species continues to exist. Do we?" Torres asked. "If we're not free, if we can't make our own choices, are we really still human?" The debate continued for hours. Jake listened to the arguments, but his mind kept returning to something Dr. Chun had said earlier. The scientist had proposed something that made everyone in the room uncomfortable. "Paul," Jake said during a break in the discussion, "tell me more about your idea." Dr. Chun looked nervous. "It's extreme, maybe too extreme. Everything about this situation is extreme," Hamilton said. "What are you thinking?" Chun took a deep breath. "If we can't keep our worlds free, we could make sure the Empire can't use them either. We could destroy the terraforming systems, poison the atmosphere, make the planets uninhabitable. The room erupted in shocked voices. "You're talking about destroying our own worlds." Someone shouted. "Better our ruins than their treasure," Sean replied quietly. Jake felt something shift in his chest. It was a crazy idea. It was terrible and desperate, and would mean giving up everything humans had built over centuries. But it was also something an empire would never expect. How long would it take? He asked. Chun looked surprised that anyone was taking him seriously. With the right preparation, maybe 60 hours. We'd have to work fast. And evacuation? That's the real problem, said Colonel Steve Parker, who led the civilian transport corps. We have maybe enough ships to move half the population. The rest would have to stay behind. Not if we convert cargo ships, mining vessels, anything. That can hold people, Torres said. He was starting to sound interested in the idea. Hamilton held up her hand for silence. Are we really considering this? Destroying our own civilization? Not destroying, Jake said. Denying it to our enemies. There's a difference. The debate went on through the night. Reports came in from other colonies. Some governors wanted to surrender immediately. Others talked about fighting to the last man. A few mentioned Chun's scorched earth plan. As dawn broke over Earth, Hamilton called for a final vote. The decision would be made by the Colonial Council, representing all human worlds. Jake watched the votes come in on the display screen. The result was closer than he expected. By a margin of just 3 votes, humanity chose the unthinkable. We will not surrender, Hamilton announced to the galaxy. We will not fight a hopeless battle. We choose a third option. The transmission went out to every human world and to the alien fleet above. Jake felt a mixture of pride and terror as he listened to the president's words. We are humans. We bow to no one. If we cannot keep our worlds, we will make sure no one else can have them either. We choose freedom over slavery, even if freedom means we must walk among the stars. High Commander Vexthu's response came within minutes. For the first time, the alien voice sounded uncertain. You would destroy your own worlds rather than serve. The Empire? Yes, Hamilton replied simply. We would rather rule over ruins than serve in paradise. Jake smiled grimly. The Empire had never faced this choice before. They were about to learn something new about humanity. The countdown had begun. 72 hours to execute the most desperate plan in human history. The next morning, Dr. Paul Chun stood in the center of the most advanced laboratory on Earth. Around him, teams of scientists worked frantically at computer terminals. They had less than 60 hours to do something that should take months. How? Are we doing on the atmospheric processors? Chun asked Dr. Kate Wilson, his environmental specialist. We're reprogramming them now, Wilson replied, her fingers flying over the keyboard. Instead of cleaning the air, they'll release toxic compounds. The process is actually simpler than normal terraforming. Sean nodded grimly. It was terrible irony that destroying a world was easier than building one. Across the galaxy, similar scenes played out on every human colony. Scientists worked around the clock to reverse decades of terraforming work. The machines that had created breathable atmospheres would now poison them. The systems that had made dead worlds livable would make them uninhabitable again. Colonel Steve Parker stood in the main hangar of New Houston Colony, watching the largest evacuation in human history. Begin. Families loaded their few possessions into cargo ships that had been hastily converted to carry people. Children cried as they were separated from friends. Adults said goodbye to homes they had spent their lives building. How many ships do we have? Parker asked his aide, Commander Rick Davis. Not enough, Davis replied honestly. We found every vessel that can make the journey to deep space. Cargo haulers, mining ships, even some pleasure craft. But we can only take about 60% of the population. Parker felt sick. That meant millions of people would have to stay behind on dying worlds. Some were volunteers, brave souls who chose to operate the destruction systems until the very end. Others were simply unlucky. The volunteers are mostly older people, Davis continued. They say they've lived their lives. They want to give the children a chance. Parker had to look away. He had seen war before, but this was different. This was an entire civilization choosing to die rather than live in chains. Meanwhile, Admiral Jake Morrison prepared his fleet for the most unusual military operation in history. His job was not to win battles, but to delay the enemy. Every minute his ship's goodbye would mean more people evacuated and more systems destroyed. "Sir, the alien fleet is moving," reported Captain Amy Rodriguez. "They're positioning themselves around our major cities." "They're trying to stop us," Jake realized. "They want to capture the infrastructure intact." "Orders, sir?" Jake looked at the tactical display. The alien ships were massive and powerful, but they were also trying to be careful. They wanted to preserve what they were conquering. That gave humanity one small advantage. All ships begin harassment operations. Hit and run attacks. Make them chase us away from the cities. Give our people time to work. The human fleet scattered into small groups. They couldn't fight the aliens directly, but they could be annoying. Jake watched his ships dart in and out of the alien formation, firing at their engines and communication arrays before jumping to safety. The aliens responded predictably. Their massive warships turned to pursue the human mosquitoes, moving away from the cities and industrial centers. It was working. On Earth, Sean watched the first atmospheric processor come online in its new configuration. Instead of the usual clean hum, the machine made a harsh grinding sound. Through the laboratory windows, he could see the sky beginning to change color. "The oceanic contamination systems are ready," reported Dr. Wilson. "Once we activate them, the water will be toxic within 48 hours. And the soil poisoning? 12 hours to complete saturation. Nothing will grow here for centuries." Chun felt a pain in his chest. He had spent his life creating worlds where humans could live. Now he was destroying them, but better destroyed than enslaved. The alien commander, High Commander Vexthol, stood in his flagship's command center, watching reports pour in from across human space. This was not going according to plan. "They're actually doing it," his aide reported. "Atmospheric. Readings show massive contamination on all human worlds. They're poisoning their own planets." "Impossible," Vexthol muttered. "No species has ever chosen this path. Sir, should we land troops to stop them?" Vexthol considered this. Landing troops would mean fighting in contaminated environments. His soldiers would need protective gear. The humans were making their worlds as unpleasant as possible for occupying forces. No, he decided, let them exhaust themselves. When they realize the futility of their actions, they will surrender. But the humans showed no signs of stopping. As the hours passed, the destruction accelerated. Industrial facilities were demolished. Spaceports were destroyed. Even art museums and libraries were burned, their contents uploaded to the evacuating ships. If the Empire wanted human worlds, they would get empty rocks. Colonel Parker watched the last civilian transport lift off from New Houston. The ship was packed beyond safe capacity, but no one complained. In the cargo hold, families huddled together, sharing what little space they had. "That's it," Davis reported. "All the ships we could find are gone. The rest of the population is staying." Parker looked around the empty hangar. A few hundred people remained, mostly technical specialists who would operate the destruction systems until the end. They had volunteered to stay behind so others could escape. "How long do we have?" he asked. 6 hours until the atmosphere becomes unbreathable. The volunteers will retreat to sealed shelters and continue the poisoning process from there. Parker nodded. In 6 hours, New Houston would be uninhabitable. In 12 hours, it would be a dead world. But the Empire would find nothing useful here. Back in space, Jake's fleet continued their delaying actions. They had lost 30 ships, but they had bought precious time. The alien fleet was frustrated and confused. They had expected either surrender or a traditional battle. Instead, they faced an enemy that seemed determined to destroy everything they came to conquer. "Sir," Amy reported, "we're getting reports from the other colonies. The evacuation is proceeding on schedule. Most of the destruction systems are online. Good. How much longer do we need to hold them off?" 12 hours for complete atmospheric contamination. 24 hours for the final evacuations. Jake looked at his remaining ships. They were battered and running low on supplies. But they had done their job. The Empire would win nothing but poisoned Rockstad as the deadline approached. Chen made his final report to President Hamilton. The leader of humanity looked exhausted. She had aged 10 years in the past 3 days. "All systems are active," Chen reported. "The atmospheric processors are working perfectly. The oceans are contaminated. The soil is poisoned. In a few hours, these worlds will be uninhabitable for centuries." "And the evacuations?" 68% of the population got away. The rest chose to stay and complete the operation. Hamilton closed her eyes. Over 1 billion people had chosen to stay behind and die with their worlds. It was the greatest sacrifice in human history. "They won't die for nothing," she said quietly. "The Empire will learn that humans cannot be conquered, only destroyed." As the 72-hour deadline expired, High Commander Vexthal received his final reports. Every human world was now uninhabitable. The evacuating ships had disappeared into deep space. The remaining humans were sealed in bunkers, continuing the poisoning process. "Status report," he demanded. "Sir, we can land troops, but the environments are extremely hostile. The humans have made their worlds toxic to most known life forms. It will take decades to reverse the damage, if it can be reversed at all." Vexthal stared at the tactical display. He had come to conquer a thriving human civilization. Instead, he had 47 dead worlds and a refugee fleet somewhere in the darkness. "Sir," his aide said carefully, "should we pursue the evacuating ships?" "Where? They could be anywhere in the galaxy by now. We don't even know which direction." They went. For the first time in his career, Vexthal had failed to conquer a species. Worse, he had nothing to show for it. The Empire had gained 47 poisoned rocks that would cost more to repair than they were worth. The humans had chosen the unthinkable. They had destroyed their own civilization rather than surrender it. And somehow, impossibly, they had won. Captain Ben Miller stood on the bridge of the cargo ship, New Hope, watching the endless stars through the viewport. Behind him, 3,000 other ships traveled in a loose formation toward the edge of the galaxy. It had been 6 months since. The evacuation and the human fleet was still running. "How are supplies holding up?" Miller asked his engineer, Tony Clark. "We're running low on everything," Clark replied honestly. "Food, water, spare parts, medical supplies. These ships weren't designed for long-term habitation." Miller nodded grimly. The evacuation had been rushed. Ships designed to carry cargo for a few weeks were now home to families who had been living in cramped quarters for months. Children were getting sick from the recycled air. Adults were fighting over small spaces. What about the mining operation? "We found an asteroid field about 2 days ahead. Rich in metals and ice, we could set up temporary habitats there." Miller felt a spark of hope. For months, the human fleet had been running on borrowed time. Now, finally, They might have a chance to stop and build something new. Dr. Sarah Jones worked in the medical bay of the ship Frontier Spirit. Around her, she could see the changes happening to the human survivors. Children born during the evacuation were different from their parents. They seemed more comfortable in zero gravity. Their eyes adapted better to the dim light of the ship corridors. The genetic modifications are working faster than expected, she reported to the fleet's medical council. The children are developing ENHANCE radiation resistance. Their bone density is adapting to low-gravity environments. Are they still human? Asked Dr. Ellen Moore from another ship. Yes, but they're becoming something new. Humans adapted for space life. In a few generations, they might be more comfortable in space than on planets. This was not just medical curiosity. The human fleet was evolving in real time. Without planets to live on, they were becoming something the galaxy had never seen. Before, a truly spacefaring species. Admiral Jake Morrison commanded the fleet's defense ships from his new flagship, Defiance. His old ship had been destroyed in the delaying actions above Earth. Now he led a fleet of converted civilian vessels, each one armed with whatever weapons they could build or salvage. Sir, we're getting reports from the scouts, reported Captain Amy Rodriguez. There's something interesting in the Kepler Nebula. What kind of interesting? Ruins, ancient ones. And they're not alone. Jake felt his pulse quicken. The human fleet had been alone in the darkness for months. The idea of finding other survivors was both exciting and terrifying. Set course for the nebula, full stealth approach. The human fleet changed direction, moving toward the mysterious signal. As they got closer, their sensors picked up more details. The ruins were massive, clearly built by an advanced civilization. But more importantly, there were active ships in the area. Sir, Amy reported, we're being scanned. Multiple contacts. They're not Imperial designs. Open a channel. The communication came through in heavily accented English. Unknown fleet, identify yourselves. This is neutral territory. Jake took a deep breath. This is Admiral Jake Morrison of the human evacuation fleet. We're refugees from Imperial conquest. We mean no harm. There was a long pause. Then, humans? The species that destroyed their own worlds rather than surrender? That's us. Welcome to the club. The Kepler Nebula turned out to be home to dozens of refugee species. The Altarians had poisoned their homeworld with biological weapons rather than surrender. The Kepler Confederation had destroyed their space stations and fled to the outer rim. Species after species had chosen exile over slavery. Captain Miller attended the first gathering of refugee leaders in the ancient ruins. The meeting was held in a vast chamber that had been built by the progenitors, a species that had vanished thousands of years ago. We call ourselves the Free Peoples, explained Commander Zara of the Altarian fleet. We have no worlds, no fixed territory, but we are not slaves. How do you survive? Miller asked. We adapt. We trade. We help each other. And we remember that freedom is worth any price. Miller looked around the chamber. There were representatives from 20 different species, all refugees from Imperial conquest. Humans were not alone in their choice. What about the Empire? Asked Dr. Jones. Do they hunt you? They try, laughed Commander Vex of the Kepler. Confederation, but we are ghosts. We appear, we trade, we disappear. They cannot fight what they cannot catch. Over the following weeks, the human fleet learned the ways of the Free Peoples. They discovered trading routes that avoided Imperial space. They learned to hide their ships in nebulas and asteroid fields. Most importantly, they learned that they were part of something larger than themselves. Tony Clark worked with engineers from other species to design new kinds of habitats. These were not temporary shelters, but permanent homes for people who would never live on planets again. They were built inside asteroids, powered by fusion reactors, and designed to last for centuries. The key is mobility, explained an Altarian engineer. We build our homes to move. If the Empire finds us, we pack up and leave. They conquer empty. Space. The human children adapted fastest to this new way of life. They played in zero-gravity chambers and learned to repair life support systems before they could walk properly. They spoke multiple alien languages and thought of the universe as their home. Dr. Jones watched these changes with fascination and concern. Are we losing our humanity? She asked Miller during one of their discussions. No, Miller replied. We're expanding it. These children will be more human than any of us because they'll be free. The first major test came when Imperial scouts discovered the nebula. A small fleet of warships arrived, demanding that the refugees surrender and return to Imperial space. This is High Commander Dexahol of the Imperial Navy, came the transmission. You are in violation of Imperial law. Surrender immediately. The response came from Admiral Morrison, speaking for all the Free Peoples. This is Admiral Jake Morrison of the Free People's Alliance. We recognize no Imperial law. We are citizens of the galaxy, not subjects of the Empire. You cannot hide forever. The Empire will find you. The Empire can try. The battle was brief, but decisive. The Imperial ships were designed for conquering planets and fighting traditional fleets. They were not prepared for the guerrilla tactics of the Free Peoples. Human ships, small and fast, darted between the Imperial vessels like angry wasps. Altarian ships used biological weapons that made the Imperial crews sick. Kepler Confederation. Vessels employed energy weapons that drained the enemy's power systems. The Imperial fleet retreated, but not before sending a message to their superiors. The Free Peoples were not just refugees. They were a military threat. They'll be back, Morrison warned the Alliance Council. Next time with more ships. Let them come, replied Commander Zara. We have been hiding for decades. Perhaps it is. Time to fight back. Miller felt something stir in his chest. For months, the human fleet had been running, surviving, adapting. Now they were being offered a chance to do something more. What are you proposing? He asked. The Empire rules through fear, Zara explained. They tell species that resistance is hopeless. But we are proof that resistance is possible. If we can show other species that the Empire can be defeated, maybe they will join us. The idea was dangerous. It meant giving up their safety and anonymity. But it also meant giving hope to billions of enslaved beings across the galaxy. The children born in this fleet will never know planetary life, Jones said quietly. But they could know something better. They could know freedom. The vote was unanimous. The Free People's Alliance would stop hiding and start fighting. The human exodus had ended. The human resistance was about to begin. As the Alliance fleet prepared to leave the nebula, Miller looked back at the ancient ruins. The progenitors had made the same choice thousands of years ago. They had chosen freedom over security, exile over slavery. Now it was humanity's turn to carry on their legacy. Ambassador Carol Adams stood in the ancient command center deep within the progenitor ruins. Around her, holographic displays showed the current state of the galaxy. Red dots marked imperial worlds. Blue dots showed Free People's territories. Green dots indicated neutral systems that might be willing to help. The intelligence is clear, reported Director Mike Johnson, head of Coalition Intelligence. The Empire is weaker than they appear. Their military is spread thin across thousands of worlds. Most importantly, they're facing rebellions on at least 50 different systems. Adams studied the data. After the human evacuation, other species had begun to resist imperial rule. The Zephyrian Empire, which had ruled unchallenged for centuries, was suddenly fighting fires across the galaxy. What about their economy? She asked. Completely dependent on tribute from conquered worlds, replied Dr. Alex Thompson, who had been studying progenitor records. If enough species stop paying tribute, the empire will collapse from within. This was valuable information. The Free People's Alliance had been planning hit-and-run attacks against Imperial shipping. Now they could target something much more important, the Empire's economic foundation. Captain Jim Foster led the first major operation against Imperial interests. His small fleet of human ships, supported by Altarian and Kepler vessels, struck at a tribute convoy in the Vega system. Remember, Foster briefed his crews, we're not just pirates. We're liberators. Free the tribute ships, rescue any prisoners, and broadcast our message across the system. The attack went perfectly. The Imperial escorts were designed to fight other warships, not the fast, maneuverable craft of the Free Peoples. Within an hour, the convoy was scattered, and the tribute cargo was being distributed to rebel groups across the sector. But the most important part of the operation was the message they broadcast on all frequencies. People of the galaxy, Adams spoke from the flagship. You are not alone. The Empire wants you to believe that resistance is hopeless. But we are here to tell you that freedom is possible. We are the Free People's Alliance. We are humans, Altarians, Kepler Confederation, and 20 other species who chose liberty over slavery. Join us. The response was immediate and surprising. Within days, the Alliance was receiving secret communications from rebel groups across Imperial space. Species that had been conquered decades ago were asking for help. Others were volunteering to provide intelligence and supplies. This is working better than we hoped, Johnson reported to the Alliance Council. We're getting requests for aid from systems we've never even heard of. But success brought new challenges. The Empire was no longer treating the Free Peoples as a minor annoyance. High Commander Vexthal had been replaced by High Commander Zexamore, a military leader known for his ruthless efficiency. Intelligence reports indicate a major Imperial offensive is being planned. Commander Lisa Brown warned the Council. Brown was a human specialist in Imperial politics and military strategy. They're calling it Operation Iron Fist. The goal is to destroy the Alliance once and for all. Adams looked at the tactical displays. The Empire was gathering a massive fleet, larger than anything they had deployed in decades. If they caught the Alliance in open battle, it would be a massacre. We need to change our strategy, she decided. Instead of running from their fleet, we need to make it irrelevant. The new strategy was bold and dangerous. Instead of fighting the Imperial fleet directly, the Alliance would target the Empire's political structure. They would prove that the Empire could not protect its own core worlds. Foster led the most audacious operation in Alliance history. A combined fleet of human, Altarian, and Kepler ships penetrated deep into Imperial space, all the way to the Zephyrian home system. Our target is not the planet, Foster explained to his captains. It's the symbol. We're going to broadcast a message from the heart of the Empire itself. The operation required perfect timing and coordination. Human ships used their superior speed to slip past Imperial defenses. Altarian vessels employed biological stealth technology that made them invisible to most sensors. Kepler ships used energy manipulation to disrupt Imperial communication networks. When the Alliance fleet appeared above the Zephyrian homeworld, the Imperial capital went into panic. No enemy had ever penetrated this deep into Imperial space. People of the Empire, Adams broadcast from orbit around the Imperial capital. This is Ambassador Carol Adams of the Free People's Alliance. We are here to show you that your government cannot protect you. We are here to offer you a choice. The message was simple but powerful. The Alliance had no interest in conquering the Empire. They wanted to show Imperial citizens that their government was not invincible. We do not seek to rule you, Adams. Continued, we seek to free you. The choice is yours. Remain slaves to a failing system, or join us in the freedom of the stars. The Alliance fleet disappeared as quickly as it had arrived, leaving the Imperial government humiliated and angry. But more importantly, they had planted seeds of doubt in the minds of Imperial citizens. The Empire's response was swift and brutal. High Commander Zexamore ordered massive crackdowns on suspected rebel sympathizers. Imperial worlds were placed under martial law. Tribute demands were increased to fund the growing military campaigns, but every act of Imperial brutality only drove more species to support the Alliance. The Empire was trapped in a cycle of oppression that made their situation worse. The intelligence networks are reporting widespread unrest, Johnson told the Alliance Council. Imperial noble houses are starting to question the current leadership. Some are even sending secret messages to us. This was unexpected. The Alliance had assumed that Imperial nobles were loyal to the system that gave them power. But it seemed that even the Empire's elite were growing tired of constant warfare and rebellion. Commander Brown analyzed the political situation. The Empire is facing a crisis of legitimacy. For centuries, they've maintained power through fear and superior military force. But we've shown that they can be defeated. Now their own people are starting to question their authority. The Alliance decided to exploit this weakness. Instead of just fighting Imperial forces, they would target the Empire's political unity. Dr. Thompson made a crucial discovery in the progenitor archives. The ancient records show that the Empire has faced internal rebellions before. Each time, they've survived by making concessions to their noble houses. But this time is different. They're facing external pressure from us and internal pressure from their own people. Adams saw the opportunity. We need to make contact with the disaffected Imperial nobles. Show them that the Alliance offers a better future than the Empire. The diplomatic mission was extremely dangerous. Alliance representatives would have to enter Imperial space and meet with potential defectors. If they were caught, it would mean death or worse. But the risk was worth it. Within months, the Alliance had established secret communication networks with Imperial nobles who were tired of the constant warfare. These nobles didn't want to join the Alliance directly, but they were willing to provide intelligence and even limited support. We're getting reports from inside the Imperial Senate, Brown reported. There's a growing faction that wants to negotiate with the Alliance. They're calling themselves the Peace Party. The Empire was starting to fracture from within. The military wanted to crush the Alliance with overwhelming force. The nobles wanted to negotiate. The Emperor himself seemed uncertain about which path to take. Foster led another major operation, this time targeting the Empire's main military shipyards. The goal was not just to destroy ships, but to capture advanced technology that could be used by the Alliance. We're not just fighting for our own freedom anymore, Foster told his crews. We're fighting for the freedom of every species in the galaxy. The Empire has ruled through fear for too long. It's time to show them that their age is ending. The shipyard assault was a complete success. Alliance forces destroyed or captured dozens of Imperial warships. More importantly, they obtained the technical specifications for Imperial weapons and defenses. But the real victory came when the Alliance broadcast footage of the assault across the galaxy. Imperial citizens watched their supposedly invincible Navy being defeated by a collection of refugee species. The Empire is not invincible, Adams declared in the broadcast. They are not inevitable. They are simply bullies who have never been properly challenged. Today, we challenge them. Tomorrow, we will defeat them. The message reached every corner of the galaxy. On Imperial worlds, people began to whisper about the Alliance. On neutral worlds, governments began to consider which side to support. On rebel worlds, freedom fighters took up arms with new hope. The Empire's response was to deploy their most powerful fleet yet, led by High Commander Zexamore himself. The goal was to destroy the Alliance's main base and end the rebellion once and for all. But the Alliance was no longer the small collection of refugee ships that had fled to the Galactic Rim. They had become a true power, with allies across the galaxy and technology that rivaled the Empire's own. "Let them come," Adams told the Alliance Council. "We are ready for them." The final confrontation was about to begin. Admiral Susan Taylor stood on the bridge of the Alliance flagship Liberation, watching the largest fleet in human history prepare for battle. Ships from 20 different species floated in formation around the ancient progenitor stronghold. Human vessels flew alongside Altarian bioships and Kepler energy cruisers. It was a sight that would have been impossible just 2 years ago. "Fleet status report," Taylor requested from her tactical officer. 850 ships ready for combat, Admiral. All Alliance species are represented. We also have support vessels from 12 neutral systems that decided to join us. Taylor felt a mixture of pride and fear. The Alliance had grown from a collection of refugee ships to a true galactic power. But they were about to face the Empire's most powerful fleet, led by High Commander Zexamore himself. "What about the intelligence from our Imperial contacts?" she asked Director Mike Johnson. "The Peace Party nobles are ready to move," Johnson replied. "As soon as we engage Zexamore's fleet, they'll begin their own operations inside the Empire. The timing has to be perfect." The plan was complex and dangerous. While the Alliance fleet fought the Imperial Navy, their allies inside the Empire would launch a political coup. If it worked, the Empire would collapse from within. If it failed, the Alliance would face the full might of Imperial forces. "Commander." Lisa Brown monitored communications from deep inside Imperial space. "The Peace Party is in position. Senator Kexival is ready to present evidence of government corruption to the Imperial Senate. But they need proof that the Alliance can actually defeat Zexamore's fleet." The Imperial fleet arrived exactly when intelligence predicted. Massive warships dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the system, their dark hulls bristling with weapons. High Commander Zexamore commanded over 2,000 vessels, the largest military force the Empire had assembled in decades. "This is High Commander Zexamore of the Imperial Navy," came the transmission. "Rebel forces, you are surrounded and outgunned. Surrender now, and your deaths will be quick." Admiral Taylor smiled grimly. The Empire still didn't understand what they were fighting. "This is Admiral Susan Taylor of the Free People's Alliance. We do not surrender. We do not retreat. We fight for freedom." The battle began with the Empire's traditional strategy. Overwhelming firepower aimed at destroying the enemy fleet in a single massive strike. But the Alliance had learned from every previous encounter. Their ships scattered in all directions, using speed and maneuverability to avoid the Imperial weapons. Captain Jim Foster led the human attack wing in a daring strike against the Imperial command ship. "Remember," he told his pilots, "we're not just fighting for ourselves. Every being watching this battle needs to see that the Empire can be defeated." Human ships dove through the Imperial formation like deadly birds, their weapons targeting engines and command systems rather than trying to destroy the massive warships outright. The goal was not to win a traditional battle, but to prove that Imperial forces could be hurt. Meanwhile, Altarian bioships released clouds of organisms that attached to Imperial hulls and began eating through the metal. Kepler vessels used their energy manipulation technology to drain power from Imperial weapon systems. "The Imperial fleet is in chaos," reported the tactical officer. "They're not used to fighting opponents who don't stand still and trade shots." But the real battle was happening inside the Empire itself. As news of the space battle spread across Imperial worlds, Senator Kexival stood up in the Imperial Senate with a data pad full of evidence. "Fellow senators, Kexival announced. "I present proof that our current leadership has led the Empire to the brink of collapse. Military spending has tripled, while tribute income has fallen by 60%. We are fighting a war we cannot win against an enemy we created through our own brutality." The evidence was damning. Secret recordings of high command meetings showed Imperial leaders admitting that the Alliance was growing stronger while the Empire grew weaker. Financial records proved that the war was bankrupting the Imperial treasury. "The rebels offer us a choice," Kexival continued. "Continue this destructive war, or negotiate a peaceful transition to a new galactic order. I say we choose peace." Back in space, the battle was reaching its climax. The Imperial fleet, despite its size advantage, was being systematically dismantled by Alliance tactics. Zexamore-S flagship was surrounded by small, fast ships that picked apart its defenses. "Sir," Zexamore-S aide reported, "we're receiving urgent communications from the homeworld. There's some kind of political crisis in the Senate." Zexamore felt his blood run cold. The Alliance had not just attacked his fleet, they had coordinated a political assault on the Empire itself. "All ships, maximum firepower," he ordered desperately. "We must crush these rebels before." His order was cut short as Alliance ships struck his command center. The flagship's bridge went dark, and Zexamore found himself floating in emergency lighting, surrounded by damaged control panels. The battle was over. The Imperial fleet, leaderless and demoralized, began to surrender ship by ship. Some vessels tried to retreat, but Alliance forces had surrounded the entire system. "This is Admiral Taylor to all Imperial vessels," Taylor broadcast. "Lay down your weapons. Your war is over." On the Imperial homeworld, the Senate voted overwhelmingly to remove the current emperor and establish a new government dedicated to peace. The vote was broadcast across the galaxy, showing billions of beings that the Empire's reign of terror had ended. "The old Empire is dead," Senator Kexival announced to the galaxy. "In its place, we propose a new galactic federation based on cooperation rather than conquest. All species, whether former Imperial subjects or Alliance members, are invited to join as equals." Admiral Taylor received the transmission on her flagship. Around her, Alliance officers celebrated their impossible victory. But Taylor felt a deeper satisfaction. They had not just won a war, they had changed the fundamental nature of galactic civilization. Dr. Alex Thompson, studying the ancient progenitor records, made one final discovery. The progenitors left a message, he reported to the Alliance Council. They said that someday a species would arise that valued freedom more than safety. They called these beings the inheritors of the stars. Ambassador Carol Adams looked out at the mixed fleet of former enemies working together to build a new future. "I think we know who they meant." Captain Ben Miller, now commanding a fleet of mobile cities rather than refugee ships, watched human children playing with young Altarians and Kepler natives. These children had been born in space, raised in freedom, and would inherit a galaxy where no species knelt to another. "What happens now?" Miller asked Admiral Taylor. "Now we go home," Taylor replied. "Back to our poisoned worlds, and we heal them. But this time, we heal them as free people." The return to human space was triumphant. The worlds that humanity had poisoned rather than surrender were slowly being restored using advanced Alliance technology. The process would take decades, but it was being done by choice, not force. On Earth, President Lisa Hamilton, now elderly but still leading the restored human government, spoke to a gathering of beings from across the galaxy. 2 years ago, we faced an impossible choice, she said. Surrender our freedom or destroy our worlds. We chose a third option, to transform ourselves and the galaxy itself. Today, no species kneels to any empire. Today, we are all free. The crowd cheered, a sound that included human voices, Altarian biosongs, and the harmonic tones of Kepler communication. It was the sound of a new age beginning. High Commander Zeximor, now a prisoner of war, was brought before the Alliance Council for judgment. He expected death or imprisonment. Instead, he was offered something unprecedented, the chance to help build the new galactic order. "You have a choice," Admiral Taylor told him. "You can cling to the old ways and spend your life in exile, or you can help us create something better." Zeximor looked at the diverse group of beings surrounding him. Former enemies working together, species that had once been enslaved, now helping to govern the galaxy. It was everything the Empire had claimed was impossible. "What would you have?" "Me do?" he asked quietly. "Help us teach Imperial forces how to serve rather than conquer," Taylor replied. "Help us turn warriors into protectors." The transformation was not easy or quick. Many Imperial loyalists refused to accept the new order and fled to the Outer Rim. Some species struggled to adapt to freedom after centuries of slavery. The new Galactic Federation faced challenges that would take generations to resolve. But the foundation had been laid. The principle that no being should kneel to another had been established and defended. The galaxy had learned that even the mightiest empire could fall if enough people chose freedom over safety. Jake Morrison, now, an old man commanding the new Federation Defense Force, stood on the observation deck of a restored Earth orbital station. Below him, the blue-green world turned slowly in space, its atmosphere clean again after years of restoration work. "Was it worth it?" asked Amy Rodriguez, now an admiral herself. Morrison thought about the billion people who had died on the poisoned worlds. He thought about the children who had grown up as refugees in space. He thought about the species that had fought and died for the dream of freedom. "Ask me in 100 years," he said finally, "when the children born in this new gala